Surprise Stories from Japan. I'm Toby, and today I'm sitting here with Olga. Olga, you're a tea ceremony master in Kyoto, and you've been in Japan for quite a while, and we have a lot to talk about tea ceremony today. But before we get into that, maybe you can introduce yourself a little bit and where you're from and how long you've been in Japan.
Okay. Yeah, well, thank you for having me here. It's an honor to be on your podcast. Well, I'm originally from Russia, and I've been living in Japan for about 7 years now. And I've been studying tea for more than 10 years now. And my history with tea is a bit longer than my life in Japan. I'm doing digital marketing at the moment, and I'm still practicing tea every week.
Why did you decide to come to Japan 7 years ago?
Well, I was majoring in Japanese history and Japanese culture, and it was not really a choice, so to say. We were all supposed to go for an exchange program for a year at some point, and obviously I embraced this opportunity and never really thought of staying in Japan for long. But it so happened that I did my exchange year in Kyoto and just kind of fell in love with the city. And since that moment, I think I've been looking for all the opportunities to come back and stay for a bit longer, just because the city is really beautiful and I love everything about it.
So how, before choosing Kyoto, were you able to choose between other places? Is there a specific reason you chose Kyoto?
Not really. At that time, I think I was already doing tea at the university, but also and I was studying Japanese language, and some of my language teachers, I believe, who were also teaching tea as it happened, proposed me to go to Kyoto. So it wasn't, again, my choice exactly.
Kind of a series of events that led you to be in Kyoto.
Yes, I was very much interested in Japanese culture in general, but I had no notion of which city would be best for me. And the system in my university was not allowing for us to choose the destination. So yeah, I kind of went with the flow. It was me and my best friend, who was also practicing tea at the time, and we just happened to go to that Ryukoku University in Kyoto. Kyoto turned out to be the best city for us, as we were historians.
And tea lovers.
And tea lovers.
So it's a good match for Kyoto.
Yeah, I'm so ever grateful to my teachers and mentors who arranged that for us. Yeah, couldn't thank them enough.
How was it when you first came from Russia and you kind of arrived in Japan and you get to Kyoto and have to settle there? What were some of the most surprising things that happened?
Right now, I can't think of anything negative happened to me in Kyoto. I have this very beautiful and bright image, but when you asked, I actually remembered my first days in Kyoto. It was about the end of August or the very beginning of September, and the weather was like it's right now, so it was very hot and humid. And I remember it was really, really hard to survive.
Yeah,
the very
summer
first
is brutal,
impression.
and especially in Kyoto, you're like surrounded by mountains. There's no air circulation, no sea nearby.
Summer is just horrible. and I was not mentally prepared for that. It was difficult to adapt to the climate, I would say, and ultimately it took me several years. So right now I believe I can do longer without air conditioner, for example, and just
your body adapts, right?
yes,
Somehow
it does.
something changes over the years.
It does. I remember I didn't have energy enough just to stand up some days because it was so unbearably hot and humid. And I think also air pressure is a little bit different in Japan. So that hit me hard the very first day or after the arrival, I think. But then, we just went around walking throughout the city, discovering new places. And in Kyoto, you've been there. It's everywhere you go, you
find a new temple, find a new old building, a traditional machiya.
It's amazing. I mean, the amount of cultural heritage in Kyoto is just amazing. So we were absolutely obsessed with the city.
Have you ever considered maybe moving to try another city in Japan, or was it like, no, this is Kyoto, this is my new home?
I never actually thought of that. If anything, I think I decided to stay in Japan for longer because of the city. I don't know what would have happened if I'd chosen another city for a start. I'm not sure, because whenever I go somewhere else, just traveling, I enjoy it very much, and there are some places that I truly love, but nothing compares to Kyoto for me. So every time I go back, it's like, it feels like home. Yeah.
And so you mentioned one of the reasons why the city was perfect for you is like the historical aspect, and then the other one is it's a kind of center piece of tea culture in Japan as well.
Yeah, that's true.
So you started tea already back in Russia before moving to Japan.
That's correct.
Was this something? How did you get interested in tea as not just like putting a tea bag in your cup and drinking it, but more like, oh, there's something behind. I want to learn more about it.
Yeah, interesting thing. I'm not a tea lover in terms of the drink. Like, I'm not a fan of tea. If anything, I prefer coffee if I can choose. But somehow, when I entered the university, although I was very much interested in Japanese culture, I wouldn't say I knew a lot. And to me, it was an absolutely different new world, unknown things every day that kind of fascinated me. And one of our teachers at the time was given just a small lecture about Japanese culture in general, and she said that we actually have a tea room
in the
university. Yes.
Oh, cool.
And that they have some tea classes almost every day, and it's an excellent opportunity for all the language learners to go there and practice, because although the teachers themselves were also Russians, they sometimes did classes in Japanese. And just in generally I learned more about Japanese culture, since tea is kind of an essence of Japanese culture. So again, I took it as an opportunity to explore more, and I just went for a short experience and found myself somehow immersed from the very start. It felt like to me, it came very naturally. I never ever thought that I would do something like that, but somehow it just felt so naturally to me. I decided to come again next week, and then next week, and then
next
I just
week, and just keep going.
Yeah, I never again imagined myself becoming a tea master or becoming a tea teacher in the future. I think I enjoyed being there because it's
the atmosphere, the people.
Yes, it's quite unusual to have this kind of very cozy and calm, tranquil place just in the midst of the biggest city in Russia, you know. Just the opposite, the Red Square and everything. It's so bizarre. And I felt like time moves differently in that particular
tea ceremonies, right? It's a very traditional kind of, it's a process, it's an event in Japan. And well, there's many elements that play into this, and maybe we can break them down a little bit later. Was there anything specific that drew you to it, that you liked doing, besides kind of just taking in the entire atmosphere from a tea ceremony experience?
For me, I think the most interesting thing about tea is the reason why I'm drawn to it is because it encompasses so many attributes, like you mentioned. It's not only about preparing a bowl of tea, it's also about wearing traditional clothes and
like today you're wearing a very nice, that's a yukata, right?
Yeah, it's yukata.
Yukata, summer dress.
Today's the last day of summer, my calendar, so just safe, you can wear that. Yeah, it's about learning how to write in Japanese, about how to hold a conversation. It's also about learning Japanese history. Just all the complexity of that, I think, kind of fascinated me, because I always liked studying, I think, and like learning something new was very exciting. So I guess tea was just like the whole new world for me, because then just kind of ritual or ceremony.
So then you decided to learn more about it. You were interested in the cultural aspect and so on. Did you start taking classes back in Russia already to really practice, or was this really something that you developed once you moved to Kyoto?
Yeah, as I mentioned, we had this tea room and a few teachers who were teaching there. We had a very, very small community of people from all like diverse background. People who were somehow related to Japan or completely unrelated. I had my times when I just couldn't continue practicing due to my studies, something. But generally, yes, I try to continue studying for as long as I could since my first year at the university, and then up to the graduation, I think. And then I received a recommendation letter from my teachers back in Moscow that introduced me to a tea community here in Kyoto already. Okay. So I kind of slowly transitioned from Moscow to Kyoto,
I was reading a little bit about tea culture in Japan, and more specifically tea ceremony. And so, I mean, the history is very long, and we were talking about it a little bit before. It took a while for tea to really grow in Japan, literally speaking. Like, it's not something that happened overnight. And also, as with many things, there's different schools, philosophies on tea ceremony. Could you maybe name the most important ones and tell us if you want part of one of the main ones and how do they differ a little bit?
Yeah, I believe it's still one tradition. I mean, there are several tea types in Japan. For matcha, it's a tea ceremony like sado, and there is also sencha-do for sencha tea. And if we're talking about sado, all these schools that exist right now, well, the great majority of them have actually taken their roots in the Sen-no-rikyu.
Okay, so Sen-no-rikyu is like the founder, the modern founder of tea ceremony.
Yeah, it can be said though, although some of them attributed more to his students or not directly to him, but he was definitely a fatherly figure in the history of Japanese tea ceremony. And as of now, I believe there maybe hundreds of different schools. I'm not so sure about the actual number, but there are three that are considered the biggest. It's Ura Senke, Omote Senke, and Musha no Koji Senke. So these are three main schools that most practitioners attributed to. I myself am Ura Senke.
Okay.
I think Ura Senke was one of the first schools that actually went abroad with the teachings of Sen-no-rikyu. It happened already after the war with one of its greatest the former heads. Sensoshitsu is his name, and he just turned 90.
Yeah,
9 or 100.
It's quite a year to celebrate that.
He's an amazing man with an amazing history, and he was the one who took tea abroad. And
so, for someone who doesn't know much about like tea ceremony and these schools, how do we imagine them? Is it, let's say, the school has a specific building with like a head teacher and then regular teachers, and you teach how to practice tea ceremony in one specific way, and then you can decide to join and you want to learn like that, and you learn from one teacher that is from that specific school, and then the other school has just another building. How exactly do we understand those schools?
So at the core, I don't think the philosophy is different very much. I believe they all are based on the same principles established by Sen-no-rikyu.
So is there like a book that lists down the main rules of tea ceremony?
Well, you can say that. It's not exactly the book, but there are some principles that exist, definitely. There are some differences in gestures, movements, in how ritual itself looks like, in the procedures, but not so much in the philosophy of it. As far as which school to attend to question is concerned, I believe it might be random actually. In my case, I believe in Russia there is only Ura Senke, or maybe there is a Omote Senke, but it's not so well known. So I actually didn't know about other schools' existence until I joined Ura Senke already. Here in Japan, I think people have more choices, and some of them just do their research and they choose based on how they feel about certain school, how it looks to them,
who the teacher is maybe as well.
That's a very important question as well, because generally speaking, you are supposed to learn everything from one master, once
So
you join.
You join the school, and one master will teach you everything from A to Z.
You join. You go to master. You find your teacher and you go there. It doesn't really look like you join in an organization or you enter in a school. There are some schools that for people who would like to become teachers in the future, but in most of the cases, it's most people, I think, are looking for a teacher, and then they try a couple of times maybe, and if they find a teacher good enough or just feel that it's
also the personal connection, right? It's two
that's very
humans
important,
bonding
yeah,
over tea.
Yeah, and then it's the teacher that they go to. Not exactly some particular school. So yes, I think they're definitely very the personal connection is very important, and it's important to find the teacher that you respect, that you understand, that you are not afraid of, because classes can be quite painful, I think, if you
physically painful or mentally painful, or both.
Both. If you make a wrong choice, it's like any relationships, I guess.
So now you kind of got a recommendation from Urasenke back in Moscow to join a school here in Kyoto, and then you arrived at the school. Where do you even start when you have to learn tea ceremony, right? There's you mentioned there's gestures you have to learn. You probably have to learn about the tea itself, but you also mentioned something important, that it's not just about the gestures, but it's hospitality, right? So you're inviting guests into the tea ceremony room and you're having a conversation with them. So when you start learning about the tea ceremony, practically speaking, once you have chosen your master, where do classes start?
I'm not sure how it's in other schools, but in Urasenke it all begins with the first lesson is all about you walking in the room.
So how you enter the room?
You learn to walk in the tea room because there is a specific walk.
Okay.
In place.
So
you need to master that. Yes, you just walk. You kind of I take it as getting used to the environment first, because nowadays I don't think many people have the opportunity to live in traditional houses with tatami. So not so many people know how to, let's say, behave in the tatami room, where to sit, where to stand, which foot to enter with, or
so there's a specific
exit
order of which foot you have to put first into the room.
Yes.
And then where you have to go exactly, and there's a seating arrangement for the master, the host, and the guests.
And first couple of classes, people would just walk, sitting, standing up, maybe practicing some bowing as well, because there are different types of bowing, and it's very important to kind of distinguish between them. And
can you give us some example, maybe, what different types of bowing there are? So
in Japanese tea ceremony, there are 3 levels of formality. I would say it's Shin, Gyo, and So. So Shin being the highest, Gyo middle, and So the lowest.
Okay.
And there are different occasions for tea ceremony, tea practice, or tea event, depending on the on the occasion or the guests that you're having, maybe some utensils that you are using, the level of formality can be different. And during those procedures done in a certain like level of formality, everything needs to be kind of aligned with this level, including bowing. So with Shin, there is like it gets deeper and slower. So is like the lowest one can be really.
So through movement and bowing, you can change the atmosphere of how the tea procedure ceremony is moving forward.
Yes, it's just everything has the level of formality, and the things I align should be aligned. So yes, knowing that is very important even before you actually practice. Just to become a guest in the tea ceremony, I think it's very useful to know how to bow and when. So people do that, and then they, I think, learn how to be a guest in the tea ceremony. So how to eat a sweet, how to drink tea properly, again, where to bow, when to say thank you or ask a question.
That's interesting, right? So so to learn to be the host of a tea ceremony, you start by learning how to be the guest.
Yes, because it's easier. Yeah, ultimately it's easier.
So once you started from there, these were like your first classes as well, and now you're a tea ceremony master. So that means you're allowed to teach as well to people that want to learn the first steps of tea ceremony.
Yes, I can teach the very basics right now. I obtained the certification a couple of years ago, and I'm on my way to obtain the next level, hopefully sometime soon.
On this journey, was it like a key moment for you where you were like, this is something that I did as a hobby, I thought it was interesting, now I want to learn more, I want to kind of become an expert or really good at one thing?
It was never a hobby for me. I never saw it as a hobby. I just, as I said, I just enjoyed doing it and being there. But also at some point I realized tea actually helped me to get through my hardest moments in life. So at some point I just very clearly realized that I just can't do without tea. Like if I don't practice, maybe it's an addiction, I never thought about it. Maybe it's just caffeine addiction or something. I'm not so sure, but yeah, it's very hard for me not to practice. I feel like the whole balance becomes unstable if I don't, and I'm missing something that I just needed to keep going, So it was never a question of whether I become a tea master and like earn my living by doing this, for example. It was just something that I can't live without.
So gradually, more and more, has your perspective changed on it? So what you found attractive or that kind of got you interested in the first place, now it's maybe something different?
For me, still now, I think the most important thing is how I feel when I practice. But definitely the perspective of how I see tea ceremony at the moment is not what I thought of it a few years ago, definitely. At that time, tea looked to me as something very... It was always an art of living for me. I always understood that. But I also thought of it as a very, so to say, mindful and almost meditative practice, where the most important thing is to kind of figure out who you are and how you connect with the world. So it's more like a philosophical practice. However, a few years ago, it happened during the pandemics, actually, when I had to look for another teacher, just because I couldn't practice anymore at the place that I used to because of the pandemics, and I couldn't live without tea, so I had to find something else. Yeah, so I found another teacher in Kyoto, and she is just an amazing person, and a great tea master, and she taught me that tea can be different. Actually, it's about making connections with people and sharing a moment with a person, and it doesn't have to be all that strict and demanding and I don't know, and imply many rules. It doesn't have to at all. It's about
the people
sharing. Yeah, it's about connecting with people, and it's also about having fun, actually.
There's a more modern approach.
Yes,
to
but
tea ceremony.
You can say that, but if you think of how tea was practiced back in the days, I think you can find many common features with that approach too, because aristocrats, for example, in the medieval times, did tea just for fun, not because they wanted to achieve an enlightenment.
Yes, it was kind of
for sure.
Tea party.
They were just having fun. It was the way of gathering together and talking, gossiping maybe, and just sharing a bowl of tea too. So yeah.
It's interesting. You mentioned the kind of the philosophical aspect and how at the beginning you thought about it more as a way to calm your mind and to kind of find your way. Because the word for tea ceremony in Japanese that you mentioned, sado, also sometimes pronounced chado.
Yeah.
And it's a kanji for tea, cha, and do, which is like the road, the way. So the way of tea, if you translate it literally. But in English, we choose tea ceremony, which reduces it somehow to just this moment where you are being served the tea in a specific way, and that's your ceremony. But whether you look at it as a personal meditation or you look at it as a way to connect with people, it's a much more important or deeper meaning than just a ceremony.
This is very true, and we have our annual tea gatherings for international students, actually, where we perform like simple ritual and talk about what sado is. And during those performances and gatherings, we usually use the phrase way of tea, and we emphasize this moment because I think many people have this image of this very strict ritual where all the movements are kind of predefined and all have the meanings and everything. But also it's not only about the ritual itself, it's only very like a fraction of what tea implies. So I like to think of it as an art of living because it consists of so many aspects, like I mentioned, clothing, calligraphy, flower arrangement.
Ikebana.
Yes, and not exactly ikebana, but it's called chabana. So
especially
because
for tea.
Yeah, the principles of it's a little bit different from ikebana, and food and making your own utensils as well. So everything, and it's like taking all the aspects of your daily life and cultivating it into the state of art, that's what, for me, tea is all about. So yeah, we try to emphasize this moment that it's the whole way. If you practice tea, it's not a hobby. You can't do it as a hobby. You have to live your life like tea is everywhere. It's having this, like, tea spirit in you all the time.
We talked about it a little earlier, and I thought what you said was interesting before we started rolling the cameras, that I was asking you, is it okay to call you tea ceremony master? And you said, yes, it's okay. It's like a good English translation. But within the tea community, within people that practice tea and practice this way of life, you said you call yourselves tea people.
Yeah.
So it's just your life is somehow anchored around tea, and you live kind of following those principles a little bit.
Yes, people who practice tea, I think, tend to call each other tea folks or something like that.
What would be the Japanese word? Chajin.
Chajin is a good word. Definitely. This is definitely is about someone who dedicates their life to tea, and it's all about tea, for sure. There are many people who practice tea and also have something else, like working other jobs.
Like you?
Yeah, being artists, for example. I don't know, making tea bowls or something like that. For those people, maybe chajin is not exactly
the right word
to say, because there's also something else that they're engaged with. Yeah. In Japanese, we would say ocha no hito.
Ocha no hito, okay. So a bit more loose than chajin
we
is very
say,
like...
Yeah, and it's very... so by that we mean that people practice tea and they understand how to... they understand all the details of the procedure, and of course can teach other people, and you can rely on them when you have a tea gathering for 50 people. If you say, oh, he's a ocha no hito nande daijoubu, it means that you can definitely rely on him because he knows what to do and how to do. So yeah, but not necessarily chajin, because it's a very demanding.
It's more like the top of the top, people that are really dedicated to that
there are
way
some
of life.
people, but not so many of them who are definitely walking down the path of being tea master from the capital. Yeah.
So overall, it's a very deep way of life, way of looking at things, and it's also very personal. But when you do tea ceremony, you do it also for others, right? You do it for customers, guests that are sometimes Japanese, sometimes maybe foreigners, tourists. How do you convey the meaning of this? What kind of maybe preconceptions do you face when people come in and their expectations with the way you look at it?
Well, explaining tea introducing tea to new people is always a challenge. It depends very much on not even the level of knowledge, but I would say how open they are to the new knowledge. Because I've seen many people who have absolutely no idea of what Japanese culture is about, and it was their first time in Japan. They don't know the language, they don't know how to sit and how to use chopsticks, for example. But they were very eager to learn, and they were very open, and they consumed the information easily. So I usually don't bring on some difficult conceptions, because I also think that tea is not about philosophical concepts or anything. It's you have to rely more on your senses rather than your ratio. So I was trying just to explain them those 4 main principles that Sen no Rikyu established, which are wake seijaku. If you ever heard of that phrase,
No, I haven't. So the Sen no Rikyu established those wake seijaku, the 4 main principles of tea. What are they?
So these are harmony, meaning harmony between
harmony.
Between people and also between objects. Just a harmony in a bigger sense within the tea room. K is respect of the host towards the guest, of the guest towards the host, and also respect towards utensils that were made by also some masters.
Shokunin.
True, yeah. And then it's sei, purity of the outer world and also the inner world. So you have to not only clean the room and cleanse the utensils, but also make sure you stay with a pure heart when you meet your guests and remain that for the rest of the procedure in the day. And then it's jaku, which is kind of hard to translate. I always struggle with that. I know the general translation would be tranquility, but it's not, the idle tranquility, calmness. It's about having unperturbable heart. So no matter what happens, you remain
Undisturbed.
True to yourself and just keep going no matter what. So that's 4 main principles, and I try to establish that from the very beginning, and then kind of explain them or show examples during the procedure where this and that principle kind of shows up. So like I'm cleansing the utensils, I'm telling this is say you are bowing when you receive tea because this is gay. You are paying. This is a sign of respect towards the host. Something like that.
Do you get any common questions from some of the guests?
Yeah, there are a couple of questions that come pretty often. One of them is about tea itself. Many people are interested in tea because I think not so many people are used to drinking matcha, powdered tea. I know it's a new boom in the Western world.
Matcha latte.
Yeah, but not so many people. I think when they actually see how it's made, they all a little bit. It's definitely a new experience for them, and they're just wondering how it's made, how it's different from so-called normal tea, and
So for tea ceremony, you only use matcha.
Only matcha and only matcha for tea ceremony.
So it's a special grade of matcha.
Yes, there is matcha, I believe, for cooking. It's not suitable for ceremony because, it's usually a little bit low quality. And for tea ceremony, it's only the finest.
And so they ask a lot about tea. Is there anything that they're often curious about, maybe the room or the atmosphere or the utensils as well?
They would ask something like, what does it mean when you did this and that? What does it mean when you, what's in that container? What's in that kettle? And
so a lot of curiosity.
Everything is very new and nothing, no tradition of the Western world or even I think Eastern world looks like Japanese way of tea. So everything I think looks very unusual and interesting, and what's in there, it's just the questions like that. And there are some people that really pay a lot of attention to every single movement, so I'm always amazed because I think I can't do that. I wouldn't be able to remember everything, but they would ask questions like, what does it mean when you wiped, when you folded your fukusa, which is silk cloth, like that? Does it have any meaning, or does it have any purpose? Why did you do it this way and not the way around? And it's the hardest questions actually, because it's just how it's been done for centuries at the moment right now. So there is no simple answer to that. But also in tea, everything is very rational in terms of movements. There is no excessiveness. Everything you just do that because it's the easiest way to do that. Sometimes it definitely has a spiritual and ritual meaning in it, like you do this folding 4 times because the 4 is for the, like, you clean in the space around you, north, south, west and east.
Interesting.
But also there are certain movements that you just can't do the other way around because it's the easiest and I guess also best looking way.
Aesthetic is also
it's
big.
also very it's also considered, it was considered, I think, when the procedures were established as they are.
Do you notice a big difference when you have foreign guests that are here for the first time and see this and everything is new, and what's in this box, what does this word mean, and Japanese guests who might be maybe familiar with some basic principles, or at least with the vocabulary?
Yes, for sure. I think for foreign guests we usually do something a little bit I don't want to say simplified, but it's more about the very basics of the tea, and also about some history, introducing some names like Senrikyu that we talked about. For Japanese people, most of them already know that. So people who come to Japanese people who practice tea ceremony, or who don't practice but come to tea ceremony, they usually come to the events that are taking place in some specific temples on some particular occasions. So every time it's different.
Okay.
And every time if you're a host, you have to prepare a certain story to tell. It's storytelling all here. So everything needs to be taken into consideration. So the place, the occasion, the guests, the season, and based on that you choose your scroll. Usually it's the story that you actually telling people would include that history of the temple, maybe some facts about the particular event that is taking place and why are they all invited.
So you're like a narrator. So when the
guests
come,
specific person who does the narration actually.
Oh, okay.
So it's hanto. It's called hanto, and it's usually a host and a hanto, because it's really sometimes you do both, but it's really, really hard. You have to be really focused because you need to talk and entertain while you're also doing the whole thing. It's usually,
it's a little too much.
I did this a couple of times, and that's something that you really need to train for. It's not very easy.
Have you ever had also Japanese guests being surprised as a foreigner to be the ceremony master?
I never specifically state that I'm not Japanese.
Okay.
That would be because that's not the point. If I'm being completely honest, I don't particularly enjoy being the narrator when I have to do that in front of Japanese, like a whole room of Japanese people, because that makes me really, really nervous. And I have to do everything in Japanese, and especially if it's a new place and it's a new temple and something that I'm not familiar with, and I have to learn a lot during like a very short period of time. So that's really challenging. But also, that's the thing about omotenashi, hospitality spirit in tea. No one cares. No one has to be bothered by the fact that you are not prepared enough, or you are afraid of doing something, or you don't feel comfortable enough. It's your problem. You have to deal with this, and you have to deliver. If you invite your guests, there is no excuse for you to
not be perfect.
So you can say, "Oh, well, I'm not Japanese," but I mean, it's just
pretend
opening
like
a back door just in case, if I say something wrong,
making excuses before you start.
There would be, but also, ultimately you kind of making people to take this responsibility for you, so that they sympathize more with you, or just.
So that will go against the principle of respect in a way where you're
just do it. Just do it. And if someone after that comes up and asks you a few questions, just answer. I mean, usually also people are very understanding and kind, and also very interested in your background, because it's not, I think, not so much about me being a foreigner. It's more about my age, I think.
Okay.
Because not so many young people practice tea these days. So the average age for a practitioner is
a little older.
Yeah. So it's like, where do you practice, and what kind of teacher, and things like that.
Do you have one ceremony in particular that you remember very clearly because it was really for you too, like just a unique experience, whether it's the temple or the season or a particular guest?
In tea there is a saying, ichigo-ichie.
Yes.
Which is one occasion in a lifetime. So nothing's going to be the same, even if you come to the same place tomorrow and you use the same flowers, which is not ideal, and the same scroll, still you're going to be different because it's another day, it's another state of mind. The guests will be different, so it's always different. But for sure, every single international tea gathering that we do for international students in Kyoto is a very special event, because we have hundreds of people in one day and rooms are full, and I'm always amazed of how respectful they are and how they listen very intently to every single word that we say, and they watch very carefully, and they try to be polite. And also there are some, actually quite many Japanese people that come too, and it's just it kind of gives the birth of very good feeling of unity when you have people of different nationalities in one room sharing a bowl of tea. And also Japanese people, some of them for some of them it's also their first time for tea ceremony. And they are learning many things along with those international students, which is, I think, very sweet too.
So it's like a new way of bridging cultures as well, and kind of connecting people
It
around
is
tea.
always about that. I think it's also in its nature, I believe. Yeah.
When you do these ceremonies for regular guests or these international students, how long is a typical ceremony, and what do you do therein?
One procedure that would include one bowl of tea for each and a sweet can take from 20 minutes to 1 hour, usually, depending on you, actually, on how fast you can go with explanation or how trained your guests are, because if they're trained and everything goes very smoothly and ends quite quickly. If you need to explain a little bit more, it can be a bit longer, but it's usually like 40 minutes, like a standard for a big gathering. But if we're talking about like chaji, like the whole thing with food and sake and 2 types of tea, conversations, it's about 4 hours each. Yeah, but they don't happen too often, obviously.
So this will be like very special occasion.
Yes,
very special guest.
This is something that you have to prepare beforehand, and you have to send invitations, ideally written, and receive answers back. And then you have the plan for the guests from the start. And you usually invite people who are more or less familiar with how to be the guest during the whole procedure. So, it's a whole process, a whole thing.
So right now, from what you've shared, it seems more like your school and yourself and the other masters at the school, you organize events. So you maybe will talk with the temple, can we organize a tea event there? Or maybe the temple will reach out to have an event there. Does it happen as well that maybe for private occasions, people ask to have a tea ceremony master come to do a tea ceremony for a private event? I don't know.
So at the moment, it's actually the vice versa. So we don't really go kind of offering our services or renting places. We have a couple of places that we practice, and it's mostly for the practitioners that we held some kind of events. Sometimes though there are some requests for my teacher, very rarely for me personally, but mostly for my teacher, and then she asks for help from her students, and we are all gladly participating in everything that she's offering. So that's how we get to participate in all those events that take place sometimes in temples, sometimes in museums. Sometimes she does something on her own, like on a riverside in Kyoto.
So it doesn't always have to be in the tea ceremony room?
No, it doesn't have to. Like, if you have a clear space of 1 tatami, you can absolutely do tea ceremony. Yeah, that's called nodate, like this type of ceremony that you do outside the tea room on usually, somewhere surrounded by nature. Yeah.
You said that you're currently working towards getting maybe an extra certification.
Yeah.
How many are there? Is there like a top of the top that you can reach and you can be like, this level now and I can do anything within tea by myself? Or is there no clear kind of path?
It's not like... It's a little bit different from other examination systems. I think there are 3 big steps: beginner, intermediate, and advanced. And there are a few steps for each level. Usually they are defined by the procedures that you can do. What I mean is, we always say procedure for tea ceremony, but we have to understand that there are hundreds of them, or like not hundreds, but a lot of different types of procedures.
So a procedure will be, for example, how you pick up the bowl.
It's like the whole ritual from the start, when you bring everything and start preparing a bowl, and then bowl of tea, and then you serve a bowl of tea, and then you cleanse utensils again and take everything back. So this is one procedure.
So there's hundreds of ways of doing that.
Yes, it's not one thing that there's several, because there are several seasons, and also different occasions, different different tea rooms, and everything changes every time.
Wow.
So even on one level, on the beginner level, you need to learn like up to 20 different kind of procedures using different utensils. So the higher you go, the more you have to learn of that. So, but you start slowly. When you get to the intermediate level, there are some procedures that are not. There are some that you can find in books, and you actually can see on pictures how it's done in practice.
Step-by-step guide.
But starting from the intermediate level, there is no thing like that. Like, you have to obtain the permission first to actually see this. So you cannot see that.
So you have to go to your master.
You are not allowed to watch unless you have it's like a secret knowledge that you have to obtain permission first, and then you're allowed to watch, and then you're allowed to try and do it for yourself, and then you learn it. And once your teacher considers that you've done enough times, that you will never know everything perfectly. That's not possible. But when you get this feeling and you understand the main principles, and you might forget something, but more or less, your master will apply for another, your teacher will apply for another certification for you that will open you doors to another level with more secret procedures that you can now watch and do. So there are a few steps.
But you're getting to know quite a lot of them now at the state where you're at.
Yes, you can say that. But also I feel like it's never enough, and I wish I could practice every day, to be honest, but it's just not physically possible, because there are so many of them, and there are some procedures that you can only do in March or in February. Wow. And if you go for a tea ceremony like once a week, you get 4 times per month, right?
Yes.
So you can do, if you do the same thing over and over again, you can do it 4 times maximum, but no one does that. So usually you go and you do one thing, and next time you go, you do another thing, because there are few procedures that you need to know. And then it's over, and you have to wait another year for a chance to come up again and then try and use this particular utensil,
So it takes a long time. If you're a new student and you want to learn, you have to be patient.
You can't learn everything. Well, at least in this tradition, it's not advisable to learn everything with your head. because it's just not possible. I never saw a person who mastered everything by like writing everything down, for example, and just revising it in their head. Although it's a very good practice, usually it should become a part of you. Your body should move before you even think of that, because it needs to be a flow. Otherwise, it's like you rely too much on your head, and your head is not very reliable most of the times.
It's like you have to practice, and it has to just kind of just become part of.
Yeah, you have to kind of be able to let it go and let it flow, to be able to feel the moment and also connect to your guests. Because if you're concentrated only on what to do next, where to put this, oh, I forgot this and that, this is not what you want to deliver as an experience for the guests. And it's not about, like, tea is not about that.
You said there's not really many textbooks beyond the intermediate level, and also that a lot of procedures are being kept secret until a teacher judges that you're allowed to see them.
You have to obtain permission.
And you also said that the average age is kind of getting older and older for people that practice tea. Isn't there a risk of this kind of a lot of the procedures being lost because they're not being transmitted or recorded somewhere?
Well, there's such a notion as chajinjinko, so the number of people who are practicing tea within Japan, and it's definitely declining, and it's a very alarming trend. However, for example, at the place that I practice at, there are a lot of young people, including my teacher, for example. She is not so much older than I am. And I see some hope. I see that many young people actually taking interest in tea in general. I believe that for many, many years, not so sure why, but people had some stereotypes and maybe prejudices against practicing tea, because they thought it's a very strict and limiting practice where you have to oblige by rules. Yes, it might be true, but only to a certain level, and definitely depends very much on a teacher. I think that we're gonna give it a fight at least.
Keep the tradition alive. Do you feel like you're also able to have an impact on the tradition, maybe from your own cultural background, to create new procedures for the tea ceremony, new ways of doing it, a new approach? Is this at all possible, or is this something where these are the existing ones and we just have to work around them?
I know some people, foreigners, that have been practicing tea, and now they are doing their own thing based on what they've learned. It's not exactly, they're not establishing their own traditions or their own schools for sure, but they're doing that their own way. And honestly, I think this is the only way you can do that, because it's the principle of shuhari. When you first learn and try to oblige by all the rules and be as close to the examples as possible, and then there's a next step when you start question every single thing. And the more you question, there is some conflict in you, but also it gives you opportunity to learn more and to see it from a different perspective and see a bigger picture, and maybe draw some parallels with your own culture, which is also important, and for sure, because tea is a very personal practice. And then it's the level when you know the tradition, you have the understanding of what you are and what you want to deliver to the world, like your message, and you start doing things as you see fit. It's a very long road, I think, and definitely there will always be people that would see it as something not very healthy for the tradition itself. But if we take a look at the history of Japanese tea, way of tea, isn't it the circle of all those things? When you go with the tradition, then you question it, and then you create something new. I believe tea is very inclusive in its core, and it allows for innovations to happen. So for sure, there always will be a place for new tea masters that they're doing their things. But also, I don't think major tea schools will go anywhere.
And for you personally, in the future, is there anything special that you'd like to do in the way of tea? Any temple you'd like to do a tea ceremony at, or other location, or? I
don't have any particular, places in mind. I don't think I have this ambition to I would like to do the tea on top of Empire State Building or something like that. I just want to, show as many people as possible how beautiful this tradition is, and also how inclusive it is, and how it's actually easy to start, and anyone can find something in tea, I believe, because it's so complex and big, and you can spend all your life trying to reach the perfection, but it's also not possible, so just enjoy your journey, and I think it's very, very enjoyable.
Thank you very much for sharing.
Thank you.
Is there maybe any question, any topic that we didn't really talk about so much, that you feel like you would like to share something more about?
I just would encourage people to try and see for themselves and approach it with an open heart, remain respectful, and to do the tradition, but also don't be afraid to challenge yourself. And I think I briefly mentioned that, but I think I have to stress it once again, that I believe in my life it was the figures of my teachers that were in my life. The importance of their presence, I think I can't really underestimate, and I'm really grateful for what they've done for me. I think I didn't even realize how much, but with the time, I think I get to appreciate it even more. And I think I just had a very, very, very rare and great opportunity.
So if someone is interested in getting into it, they can come to Kyoto and find the Urasenke school of the way of tea.
Yeah, they can just start with some experience and have a feel of it, and then connect with other tea people, because it's a very interesting community too. There are a lot of different people from many countries, from different background, artists, yeah, it's just a very enjoyable community of people.
Well, thank you for sharing so much with us. It was great to see also how passionate and how important this is for you, and get a better understanding of what's behind tea, and not just the ceremony.
Useful for
Yes.
someone.
We'll leave some links in the descriptions, and we will hopefully have many questions that we can then answer. Thank you, Olga. This was Fish and Rice Stories from Japan. We'll see you again next week. Thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. Bye.